DePue, and we had a great first session, and this session is on strategies for handbell assigning. And so hopefully you picked up both of the, there were two handouts at the door, very similar but different. And so I'm really curious as we go into discussing handbell assigning, what kinds of groups or what size of groups you're working with. And so is there anybody here who's working with a 2-octave bell choir? Great. Great. And do you have more bells than that, or you just have 2 octaves?
We have 4 octaves, but the group is kind of dwindled in past years, now taken over. So we're building again.
Well, I want to commend you on focusing on the size of the range that works for the size of group you have. Oftentimes people will say, oh, but we want to play 5-octave music, but we only have 8 people. And guess what? You're the director. So you get to decide, and you should, because it's about helping them have a successful experience. And composers have gotten better and better about writing music for smaller size, advanced music for smaller groups. And so I think you find what works for your group, but expecting them to cover all this stuff, you know the answer to that is that they really can't cover.
That's what they did with our previous director. They were playing 3-octave stuff with not enough people.
Right, and they can't do it. No matter well, I can play G and B and A and C up here at the top and four-in-hand all of this, but they can't do all the techniques. They can't. They just can't do it. I mean, so you have to decide that. How about people who are working with 3-octave groups? And is that the, do you have more bells, or that's just what you have? And when I say just, it's not a pejorative comment, it's just for information.
Yeah, that's all we have.
Yeah, just have 3 octaves?
Well, our church has a 3-octave set and a 5-octave set.
Okay, so you have various choirs, and one group is a 3-octave group?
And one's 5.
Mine, we have, I believe, 4. I don't. We have it extended. We probably have the people that we should just limit to a 2-person, but sorry, not 2-person, a 2-octave. But some of the people in there are old stalwarts and still demand the 3-octave music. So I'm slowly working on that. We've got we have 6 people, and they want to do a 3-octave.
And you say 6 people, and well, look and see. Yeah, you just look at it and go, to do the music that's written today, you really need a certain number of people in each group to make that music happen. And so I think that my hope today is to encourage you about being strong in your convictions about what will work best. And then 5 octaves, 4 and 5 octaves. You know, the nice thing about 3-octave groups is don't dismiss the 3 to 5 octave music. The composers have worked really hard to make sure that music works for 3, 4, and 5 octaves, that the bass clef parts the bass lines are maintained. Now what that means is sometimes your CD ringers don't get to ring as much because they have to omit the things in parentheses or whatever. I can't tell you the joy when we finally got to add some bells. And people said, you mean I don't have to omit notes any longer? No, play it all, you know. And so so that's really great. But there's some really wonderful music that was intentionally written for a number of ranges of bells. And so don't let all that extra stuff discourage you from utilizing some really fine music for 3-octave choirs. And while there is some great 2 to 3 octave music, I think for 3-octave choirs, sometimes the people on the outside edges really don't get to play very much. And that would be a time when I would be really much for moving around positions so that people get more experience. 3 to 5 or 5-octave choirs, I'm an advocate for people really learning and honing their skills in a particular area. And so I'm also curious how many people have their choirs in the 5-octave, 4 or 5 octave, have their ringers move from position to position.
They'd go on strike if I did that.
On strike.
With the U.
I've tried it.
Do you know, I did it one year, and you know, there was a lady who actually said, if you don't need me to ring 4 in hand, I guess you just don't need me in this bell choir. And I thought, golly, oh, you know, and you know, that has nothing to do with bell choirs. That's just a person and their issues, you know, and we have all of that in the ministry that we deal with. And you know, I figured she needed to have empathy for someone who had something different in their bell ringing experience. And, you know, she didn't quit the bell choir, but she made herself be heard, you know, which is fine. So let's move through the chart here and take this extra sheet out. Mine's a little bit different colored, and as I realized, I have to apologize. I have just moved in the last 4 weeks, and as I was getting my stuff set, I would have a box that said Baylor, Hallelujah, Baylor, Hallelujah. Don't mess with this box. I mean, I had to put a sign at my house. Don't put this on the pod, or you're in trouble. You know, it's like I have to find it. But what I found was I have a couple of versions on my hard drive of this particular sheet, and the one I gave you is not the one I have right here. So I'm going to add a couple of options for you that I'll put up on the board so you don't try to go crazy while I try to say out loud what, you know, what's on this. So I apologize. In all the craziness of moving, I printed off the wrong thing, and my box of stuff made it, but the hard drive had different things on it. But let us take a look at this sheet, because I put holes in mine and I stick it in my bell folder. And let's start on the page that says 1, dividing up the bells, A, 2 octave options. That's the side that I'm on. And here are 5, hopefully you have 5 options, yes, 5, I'm good, thank you, for working with groups by using, well, I'll just start. The first one, hopefully the chart makes sense that in option 1, there are 7 ringers, and here are how the positions are divided up, and then the G6 is shared. And what that means is it goes to whoever can play it. Maybe it gets farmed down all the way to the G and A ringer. It doesn't matter where it goes. It's just you look to see who can play it, and you let them play it. And don't let them tell you, I don't read the treble clef. They can see the note that's above the top line of the treble clef. They don't need to even know what it's called. You know, just put it down there. And, you know, sometimes if you're in this situation, you might say, who can play this bell? Let them decide. First of all, the person who's bored out of their mind will be the first one to say, I can play that. Now maybe they can and maybe they can't. It depends. I like to try it both ways. I like to have a plan, and then I like to see who's already recognized. That means they're on another level. It's good to know who those people are, and it gives them some ownership in solving a problem, which all those things are good. If I had a group of adults, I think I would think 7 ringers in a 2-octave choir was really good, because if you have the next one, number 2, with adults, you've got one person just ringing the G6. I wouldn't put my best ringer there because they'll get in trouble. You know, they'll become the assistant director and start trying to tell people how to do stuff. Like you probably have none of those in your group. Yeah, we'll talk some more about that later. But I like number 2 for children because it's a good option for them, for that number of ringers and that number of bells. Then number 3 is just a different, an interesting position, with the 5th position being just the A. A rings a lot. It's a very active bell. So then 6, 7, and 8, positions 6, 7, and 8 have 2 bells each. Now here's the dilemma with that particular arrangement. I'm a high advocate for literacy. However, I think people think way too hard about the letter names of the notes that they're playing. I think it's very much more like a game, a matching game. In the positions that I typically use, which are your standard, well, even down the 3-octave C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, 2 diatonic bells for each person. The left hand plays a space note, and the right hand plays a line note. And all you need to know is which space and line you play. And when there's a big chord that comes along when you're sight reading, there's a big chord that comes along and it's all spaces in your neighborhood of bell playing, which hand are you going to play? Spaces, it's left. You've got a 50-50 chance of getting it right. I'm not an advocate of circling notes. The notes are already there. So quit circling and highlighting, and you know, that's one thing to really just tell them. They're smarter than that. They are. They know if you gave them a written test, you know, which notes are yours, they already know. They had to circle them to find them, right? Well, then they just have to learn. But it's just 2 notes for the most part, yes, plus the sharps and flats. They can do that. They just want to have this other thing because that helps them focus. That's all the circling and highlighting is about. They can learn to focus in other ways. So encourage them, wean them off of that. This is a piece you're going to play because partly that after they've been ringing for 10 or 15 years, they don't even realize they don't need that anymore. They're just, it's a habit, it's a crutch, it makes them feel good. But wouldn't they feel really great if you said, okay, here's a clean piece of music and I'm going to put a mark on this piece. When I hand out a brand new piece, depending on what it is or what it's for, and from time to time I'll change things to give them a variety of experiences, but I'll put a piece of music out and say, don't touch it, especially these four-in-hand people at the top who want to write out the world on their score. This is about sight reading skills. They're never going to get their sight reading skills up if they're always marking everything in their score. They've already figured it out. Well, they had to know what it was to mark it. They already know where their notes are. So we're not marking anything. So how exciting would it be to know that they could actually play a piece without marking everything in their score? That's a good feeling. That's something they ought to get to experience. That's part of our role in teaching them literacy. Now, the reason I don't say a whole lot about letter names is I will have people say, I played G and A6 for years, and the G was in my left hand, and now I'm playing F and G5, and the G is in my right hand. And my response is, who cares? It's a line, play your right hand. It's a space, play your left hand. I try to bring it down to that basic because they can understand that. And I'm not speaking down to them. I'm just saying take the mystery of the letter names off. Yes, I want you to know what the letters are, but this is this and this is this. Okay? Okay, we're good. And off they go. Yes?
Now, how do you do that with number 3 there?
That's the challenge.
Okay.
That's what all that yakking was about. Exactly. So, so the problem then is position 6, 7, 8. I'm on A, big A, position 3, 8 ringers. When you position 5 is just the A. The positions to the right now have this the line in their left hand and the space in the right hand. I would never use that one. But it's there because maybe that's the best option for you. But I want you to be thinking, if you become an advocate or already are an advocate for left hand is space, right hand is line, and that is something that you drill into your ringers, option 3 is not going to be your best option. And neither is 4. But I have found in option 4, and I've used option 4 before because F and G are used a lot in 2 octave bell pieces. I asked the F5 position person to ring their F5 in the left hand, and their G, the other person, to ring that in their right hand. So they're already getting that associated line in the right hand, space in the left hand. Just because they're ringing one bell, they might want to put it in their dominant hand, which could be either one. But in that situation, I asked them to play it in the correct. And so back to option 3, I'd ask that position 5 ringer to ring their A in the left hand. And so then position, option 5 has 9 ringers, and you split the A and B, and then you can, so you do 4, does this make sense? I don't know how to say this. On option 5, you do option 4 plus you split the A and the B, yes? And to go on, if you had 10 ringers, you'd split the D and E. I'm giving you a priority of where to split the positions. Sometimes you end up with all these kids in your middle school bell choir, and you've got to find something for them to do. And you've really got to find places where they're going to ring when you have lots of kids because you need to keep them out of trouble, yes? Because they're a lively, wonderful group. And so I'm going to stop and interject one thing, and I'll do this all day. I don't want to do too many wild things off track, but talking about having a ringer ring the space note in their left hand when that's the only bell they have and their dominant hand's the other hand. A quick story is I had a lady who came into the adult bell choir, very intelligent woman, had been a college professor. She was a good student. She took instruction very well. And I would always say to my ringers, I'm not criticizing you, I'm giving you instruction. So switch, shift that thinking about me correcting you and feeling bad about it. Just receive it as information and make the adjustment. And I try to say those things very non-animated, just matter of fact, so they, not to raise anxiety. But she said, my left hand has no tone whatsoever. I mean, physical tone, not pitch, not the bell. My hand has no ability to manage itself. It's sort of floppy. And so I just said, you have a stupid left hand. And she said, yes, it has no, I just can't make it do. I mean, she would ring and her bell would just be weird. She couldn't do it. She had no ability with her left hand, And I said, okay, so here's your assignment for this week. You're to open every door that you encounter with your left hand, all doors. We're going to create a neurological pathway. You have no pathway here. You never use your left hand, so you have to start using your left hand. And she said, okay. I said, you know how doors are. Every kind of door, from the car door to the grocery store. Well, of course, they're all open for you now, but all these different doors, they turn this way, they turn that way, they open, down, whatever. So all week, left hand, everything, every door left-handed. And so I think she did that for a couple of weeks, and I said, okay, have you been doing that? Yes. So let's graduate to the next thing. She had 3 children. You're going to pour all liquids with your left hand. Now she had to, it's a little finer motor skill. She had to approximate a place, time, space, energy, yes, things that are used in music all the time. How much weight, distribution, pour, not spill it all over the kitchen cabinet, all those things. She started pour every kind of jug, bottle, whatever, left-handed. So she did that for a while, and I said, do you want to graduate to the next level? And she said, yes, but I found out later she never really did this. I said, you need to brush your teeth. You need to get down on that level. Brush your teeth with your left hand. And I've never talked to a neurologist specifically about this, but I know that people can improve their weak hand really quickly by using it for certain levels of specific dexterity requirements. So I would encourage you, if you have someone who really feels like one hand, and I notice as I've been doing this, I've been using my non-dominant hand, my right hand is just sitting here, I'm like, oh, that's odd. But you really can develop that other hand. I went through a period of time when I couldn't use my right hand, and about 6 months. And I found that I had to start using my left hand. So I started using my left hand, and I was writing, and it was pitiful. And one day, my left hand started to write cursive. And I didn't say, let's write cursive today. And I did ask the neurologist this, and he just nodded his head like that is a natural progression, that you have this in your brain, even though it's trained for the other side. At some point, your body says, so I started to make these circling motions with my left hand. I thought, oh, that's fascinating. So again, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and what we're able to help people accomplish. So if somebody's willing to take on that assignment, I highly encourage it. It will help them with their weak hand, and I'm sure most of us have had somebody in our group who just, their non-dominant hand was the real challenge.
Well, you never told us that it worked.
It worked. She is a fantastic, thank you, the net result. She is a fantastic ringer, and she can do whatever's needed now because she's met her left hand, and she's had experience. Her left hand has grown, and her brain did it, and she chose, which is great. So it was very good, very good. B, 3 octave options. I'm really curious, does anybody have 10 ringers in a 3 octave group?
Yeah.
Great.
Last year.
10 ringers works really well, and I think that there are a couple of options that are really good. Number one, the E and F ringer in a 3 octave choir, they don't have a whole lot to do, and so Will you mind shutting that door? Thank you. You read my mind. My ADD kicks in. I'm like, I can't do that. Because there's no such thing as passive listening, right? You know, we're always listening. So it's like, I'll just start singing with them. The 10 ringers, sharing the EF4 position. You can just, it doesn't play very often. You can farm it out to different people. Thank you. Option number 2, I like this. If you have 3 octaves and you think you might be going to get the 4th octave, because you can move the B4, the B6 and C7 down. I don't have it on here, but well, I have it down at the bottom. But you can move the B6 and C7 down to the 7 and 8 ringer. So the 7 can take the B6 and double the B5 and B6, and the C7 can go to the position 8. So I'm on B, 3 octave options, option number 2 with 10 ringers. This is how I, and it's kind of funny because you think if you're going to expand bells, you probably need more ringers than, you know, having less than enough ringers to fill a 3 octave choir, because 11 is really the standard for 3 octave choirs. But if you only have 10 ringers and you know you're getting ready to expand to more, the 7 and 8, it prepares them to be forward hand ringers. And that's how I actually learned to be a forward hand ringer. I played in that spot and we moved those bells down. And in, bless you, in my bell choir, when we had 3 octaves, we did that as well. And it really worked well. Those people were ready. Those 2 ringers immediately went up into the forward hand positions when we got more bells. And then number 3, 11 ringers, that's just a great standard assignment. It shares the load, and so I think that's really, really good. Let's flip this over. C, 4 octave options. Fewer than 11 ringers is not recommended. This is really, really challenging. I've got number 1 that has 10 ringers and it shows a couple of options. It starts to get a little goofy. You'll see that the C and D 4 position has been split, and it also shares the E and F 4. And here's the challenge of all that: it makes you as the director have to work really hard to assign the piece. It has been a lot of time. You know, when you're able to have like option 3 with everything all set and the full group and the right number of ringers, that's less assigning. Special assigning that you have to do. You may really love that kind of work, that detail work, and that might be a real gift of yours. Great, knock yourself out, do that, you know. But I'd rather be directing, you know, working with the people and the pieces than assigning all the stuff. So that's not my first love. Number 2 is just to be clear, at the top of these, 1 and 2, it has B6 and C7 with the 7/8 for the position. Does that make sense that those bells go down to ringer 7 and 8? And then position 3 has 12 ringers. And so now I have my, your standard 1 through 11, positions 1 through 11, plus base 1. So I think that's a great option. Then the 5 octave option, I actually have 7 options, and so you have 5. So I'll go through these.
6.
You have 6. Oh, you do have 6. Great, thank you. I have way too many pages of this. Oh, good. I feel so much better. So in option 1, it has 12 ringers, and it really loads down the base 1 ringer. Do you see that? Yeah. And I'll tell you, they can't play all that stuff. It's depending on the level of piece, or the rhythmic activity, or the harmonic rhythm of the piece. If it's, you know, if it's 1 harmony per measure, not so bad, as long as there are no fifths. But when you're shifting harmonies multiple times in a measure, it just gets really hard. So. Then number 2 has the bass a little bit different. I like C, D, and F, and E, G, and B. I especially like E, G, and B for the bass 2 ringer because they're all lines. I mean, it's just a really easy thing for them to see. And they're active. Both positions are active, so it's not like one gets more than the other. Having the A3 over with the CD1, you know, the position 1, it works most of the time, but as you can tell harmonically, the A and C are in chords together, and the A and D are in chords together. And the struggle with that is when they happen right next to each other. Something has to get sacrificed, and so that's and I think that's our challenge as far as having low bell ringers and getting everything played. You always have to the lowest part, the bass line itself, has to be maintained. So if you have to leave something out, maybe you have to leave the 5th out when you're making choices like that. But hopefully you have enough ringers and don't have to do that. On position 3, which is one of my favorites, does your bass 1 have C, D, F, and A?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you. This is the one I use the most. It just seems to work out. Position number 3. And one of the things I like is because it splits the scale up. Except for the C, D, if you were going to take the C scale, C, D is bass 1, E, bass 2, F, bass 1, G, A, B. Do you see how it switches back and forth? So when they have a running line, it's different people instead of, you know, someone trying to, I mean, you know, you've seen it, it's crazy. So this has been very successful. I think of all the ones I've had, that particular one has been the best. And then, and you know how it is with bass 1 and bass 2, and everybody has a different numbering, or maybe you have an A and B, whatever you call these positions. That all is dependent on the piece, yes. Sometimes I have to play your bell for you, and that's for any position. Nope, these are my bells. Nobody can play them. I can play them all. No, you can't. Yes, I can. No, you can't. Yes, I can. So that's always a challenge for us, and not to, you know, you always want to be building them up. That's really, really important. That's part of the body of Christ. That's what we're called to do. But there are times when people's ego gets in the way of the whole, and you have to remind them that you're making the decision for the whole. And people are pretty reasonable, but you know, you have crotchety people in your groups. Everybody's got someone who wants to be able to do it all, and unfortunately, we all can't do it all. So,
Amen.
pardon?
Amen.
Amen. So you just have to encourage them, and remember that you're the director. You know, that's you're making good decisions and working hard. And so I like number 3. Number 4 is a little bit different, and I've tried most of these, so I've had some experience in different ways. Then number 5. 13 ringers. Do you have C, D, and G, and then E, F, and A, and then they share the B3? Is that what yours says?
Yes.
This is number 5 for 13 ringers? Yeah. Okay. These are just other options, and you can try whatever you think might work. And then number 6 is that 14 ringers, C, A, B, and D, E, with three bass positions. I use this with my youth choir because I always tend to have more in the youth choir, and I like this division. The number 6 for 14 ringers. This is what I use with my youth choir, and I had a senior who came back late in the spring, and the boys who'd been doing it in 2 positions, all of a sudden we split it back into 3. And I was like, oh, now we don't have as much to do. I said, yeah, but the music we're getting ready to prepare for tour is harder. And they were like, okay, good. And the only way we're going to be able to do it is to divide this up. So so that was good. That was good. And then another option that someone gave me, and this is just a division of the bass. This could be number 7, and it really has to do with 3 bass positions. You could have the basses, bass 1 could be C and D, bass 2 could be E and G, bass 3 could be A and B, and then they share F. They could just float or could be assigned to a different person based on the piece itself. And I think there are lots of other options, but I like to tell the bass ringers what they're playing in each piece and how that's going to be divided up, and where I have found someone's going to share a bell in this measure. In measure 49, bass 2 is going to ring this. I like to have that all lined out before I give them the piece, because if they're hunting, it's waste of time. And you're the expert, you do the assigning, you tell them how it's going to go. And this is all good, nice, positive stuff. It's not controlling stuff, but it's about this line of success, what it takes to help them have a good experience. If you're working with a really, really advanced ringers, they may say we know something, or they may find that what you've assigned them doesn't really work in real time. Well, that's all a good conversation to have. But for the most part, it's good for you to let them know how it's going to work. And if that hasn't been your MO and you're thinking, okay, I think I might like to do that, fall is a really good time to start. Say, I've already marked the pieces, this is the positions, and this is how it's going to work. And I think that's really helpful for them. It says, they know you care about them or you wouldn't be standing in front of them, but to give them that extra bit of care, especially if you work with a lot of bass ringers, I think really knowing what they have to go through to play their part is a really important thing, and it really helps everybody. There are times when you might have to bring one of these bass bells and assign it a little farther up. Maybe it's just an E flat and it plays 3 times in the piece, or I don't know what, but there are lots of options for where to put them. But I think these are good basic options, and like I said, I just stick this in my handbell folder, and if I have a problem or something, I'll go, okay, maybe there's another option that might work, and try that. So this is basically this chart, and so let's go. Does anybody have any questions about this chart? Or yes, sir.
I do. A curious question. I often find myself, like say with children or even adults, and for easily understood example, say you were ringing 2 octaves with adults and 8 ringers. If you have the 8th ringer show up or say, I want to ring, I'm hesitant to say, sorry, we don't have a place for you.
So I would, if I had 8 adults show up to ring 2 octaves, I'd go to number 3 on this chart.
But then you still have somebody ringing 1 bass.
That's right, but an A5 is much more active than a G6 will be in 2 octave music, so that's why I choose it. Yeah.
Do you ever, like with children even, I use position 1 there, but then I just write in for the top G, I write in whatever I can find that he or she can play, something above the 2nd octave,
sure.
or A, or
like a C7 from
right.
time to time, sure.
Right.
I think that's great, and those are all good options to give them more to do. Yeah. This is just a starting point, but I know you probably have lots of different variations that would require, and it's also, when that kind of situation comes up, it made me think, oh, well then maybe we should recruit so we can do 3 octaves instead of, that's a good motivation for them to recruit. Well, bring a friend, find somebody else to bring.
I find myself so often in the last few years between 3 and 4 octaves, and I'm trying to make that work and ring 3.5 octaves and write in notes and keep ringers busy. It's just a continual challenge, and I guess it'll forever be that way.
Yeah, so then at some point, I guess you personally have to decide, how do I want to spend my time? Do I just want to encourage them to play the best they can with what they've got, or do I want to edit,
Right.
which is fine, But, yeah, I think recruiting some new ringers, and I didn't put it on the list, but last year I did a handbell kind of rookie camp last August, and it was a great experience to have people come in for 4 Monday nights in August for 1 hour and do a recruiting process. You'll find some people who never run, but they're musical, and there's something, there are people who could just step up to the table and do it, and they've never rung a bell in their lives. They're just made that way. And so you may find there's some people available in your church that could ring bells but never have. And you go, oh, okay, here, come on Thursday night to our bell rehearsal. So that might be another recruiting tool to help you fill out so you've got more people. Because I think there are bell ringers, even if they haven't rung, there are bell ringers in the making that just have never thought of themselves doing that. They've always thought that was a neat thing when they saw it in church or wherever. So I would encourage you to pursue that as another option for getting another ringer. But encourage your ringers to, but it sounds like you've got some, you're making it work.
Right.
Which is
make
good.
it work.
Yeah. Other questions about? Yes.
Are you gonna talk about recruiting?
It's not on my list anywhere, but are you going to, are you doing the lunch thing today? That might be
Well, I was gonna offer a suggestion, if anybody, what we did along that line was, people are always interested in Christmas and bells. And so I started doing a rookie ringer Christmas bells in the fall, where if you've never rung or just wanna ring again, just come in, it's 45 minutes or an hour on Sunday evenings, and they just ring Christmas music, starting in September. I teach them the basics, and they just ring Christmas music, and we perform some, and then I've got subs and people to feed into the other groups.
That's a great entry point, and it's something they're really interested in. Well, that's great. Thank you. Well, let's go back to the handout. There are different philosophies. I'm at letter A on variations. We looked at the list, but a couple of other thoughts. Does anybody here move positions? Did I ask that already? Does everybody stay in the same? You do move positions?
You asked if any 3 or 5 octave people did. So having only 6 ringers, half the music we do at least is custom stuff that I say, okay, we have X number of bells we need to do, and I take a hymn or whatever it is. Split it up.
So they're pretty flexible about that. That's good. And you have people. Sometimes I usually ask people over the summer, do you like your position? Do you want to stay in the position? Do you want to move to another position? I never want to assume that they're locked in for life. Well, there are lots of people who are locked in for life, but because they've honed their skills, ultimately I think that's part of it, or they've found something they're comfortable with, or they've been successful with. But I always like to see what they're thinking, and I won't know unless I ask. So I just send an email out and say, tell me what you're thinking. If you are interested in moving, where would you like to go? Some people are like, I'll go wherever you want me to go, but that, so, and I think if this is always good to ask, especially when you've lost a ringer and you're trying to fill a position, and it's like, okay, what are the best options for the group? This person might really work well in this situation, and we'll talk some more about what it takes to play different positions and who you might be looking for to fill a particular spot on the table. I think a couple of thoughts, I think staying in one place helps new ringers get familiar with the position, and it aids in the success for that ringer. And moving around gives ringers a chance to grow and learn the challenges and joys of ringing in another position. It gives them empathy for each other. And it might awaken some desire in them to grow in their ringing in a different way. And then, of course, we've already talked, there are some people who just refuse to move, and that's okay. I'd rather have the person in the bell choir ringing and having a good experience, and that's okay, unless there's someone who's, the group is moving on and they're holding the whole group up, and that's a ministry decision you have to make. What is the best thing for the whole group? If it's lowering the morale of the group, that's a bigger issue than just saying we're not about becoming the best bell choir, which I believe is true in the church. We're not about becoming the best bell choir. But if the group as a whole is moving in a direction and there's somebody who's not because they're just not interested in growing or whatever that is, then that has something that happens on the inside of the group that may not be healthy for the group. And I don't know what your situation is, but you understand what I'm talking about. It's not something that I think is that common, but it does happen, and that's something to consider. And I also think when it comes to deciding where people are going to ring, new ringers getting successful, if you have a weak ringer, someone who's not as talented or able as someone else, and you put them at B6 and C7 or E and F4, because these are places where you might be able to hide them or they could do less damage, and I hate to speak that way, but you know what I'm talking about, they won't ever become a better ringer because they don't ring very much. So I think the two best places for ringers who are struggling are the ones right in front of the director, for two reasons. B4 and C5 are at the top of the staff. There are no competing notes. They're not stuck in the middle of the staff. They're up on top. You can see them very easily. And I don't think it matters whether people read bass clef or treble clef. Just say, this is where your two notes are. Just find them. They'll get used to it. D, E5, for the same reason. They hang below the staff. They're easy to see. There are no notes below them. It's very simple to see. And they're right in front of me. So I can give them attention. And they ring a lot. They will only get better if they ring. If they're stuck in the places where they don't ring, they won't get any better, and they don't play very often, and so they have to be super concentrated, focused type people. And then they're so nervous because they have hardly rung that they pick up and they're afraid to ring. You see those people who are afraid to ring, but they were going to ring? I just said, just ring. We're practicing. Don't worry. I can see you. You know it. And then they don't ring. Go ahead, just ring. It's okay. Give them permission. So I think when putting new ringers in, you want to be, give them a place that's meaty. Give them something to do. And then B, aids in ringing. We've talked about lines and spaces versus solely note naming. So we've covered that already. C, if I ring E and F, does that mean I play E flat and F sharp? And the answer is
Yes.
yes, unless you can't play it because it's not working in your position. You can't get there, you've got too much to do. That's where your neighbors. There are lots of hands around, somebody else can play. Some people have the luxury of more than one bell set, so they can, have another F sharp 5 on the table. Not very many people have that option.
Can we go back to your weaker ringers for a second?
Yes.
I agree with you about those positions, but our bell ring is not set up where those people would be right in front of the director.
Oh,
They're actually off to the side, because
interesting.
we don't have that wide space, we have depth, so we're in short little rows.
Gotcha.
So
Oh.
DE is way over on, like one end, and then BC starts the next row, to be like a bass row.
Any option for a different space?
No, unfortunately.
You could
But I just didn't know,
instead of doing the horseshoe sort of thing, you can take those horseshoe sides and make that the back row with bass and treble, and then your front is.
It's not a horseshoe, it's 3 rows.
Yeah, the rows thing is really
Three
hard.
rows. I thought it was. Oh.
No, it's 3 rows.
Yeah. I think I'd be schlepping those bells somewhere else in the building, quite honestly.
Well,
Honestly.
unfortunately, that's where sanctuary space is too.
Oh, the sanctuary. Well,
It's
then
set
you
up
want
that
to do what's in the
There's no way
sanctuary.
we can set up, there's really just not an option to set up other ways.
I'll tell you what you might do. When you have time, find a colleague in the area, have them come in and look at your space.
Mhm.
You need someone else to look at your space.
Okay.
You've been in it too long.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
we all
Yeah.
have to do that when we have space constraints. The best thing I know is to bring in somebody else and say, what would you do in this situation if you were new? And then that'll give you some idea. And it may be property and grounds has to make some adjustment in the space, and are they willing to accommodate the ministry? That's to do the ministry. But I'd still use those people in those places,
Right.
even if they're spread out. But that's a whole nother, bless you.
What if there's no director per se?
So the director's a ringer?
Yes, I'm the director and I have to ring. If not, we have 5 ringers. So
So which position would you ring? Is
well,
that what your question?
you were saying about the people who are not necessarily strong in ringing, because we've got a couple interested, but they're a bit skittish. And you had mentioned the C and D,
Right,
or the B
right.
and C or the C and D, because they're right in front of the director. You can give special attention. Well, I'm too busy ringing my own bells. It's got to the point where we're just counting the beats and then we ring as we go. For
You know, I might do two things. I might put a table out in front, and I would ring, but I would be on it. I'd take myself out. I'd also not give myself the most important position, because you need to focus on them. So even if you're the better ringer in the room, find easier music, let them do the work. You find whatever position has the least to do. So you can focus on that, but you've got to be out here and look. And maybe you do that when you're first learning a piece and you help them through parts so you can see what's going on. Sometimes just don't ring your bell. One of the things I think that we get worried about having holes, and we all have a hole in a rehearsal, but it makes them become independent in a way that you couldn't get any other way. And so for them to play on the numbers, know the address of your bell and play. If you play on the and of 2, play on the and of 2. Don't play after Joe, because what if Joe doesn't play? Then you don't play, and then it's a domino. So make sure that you're playing on, I just say the address, find out where your bell plays in the measure and play on that. That's all you have to do. The big picture will appear, but if you're trying to base what you're doing, you base your dynamics and other things off of the people around you, but not when to play. There are other levels of exception to that, but on a general rule, if someone's missing, you still play your part, So those are just some thoughts about getting out in front from time to time. It'll teach you a lot about what they're doing. You see a lot. I do know when I'm filling in, like if someone's out and I'm on this side and I pick up some bells, I learn a whole lot about what they're doing when I'm playing with them. It's a very interesting experience. I like the directing part, but when I actually play, I can tell when they're together or not in a different sort of way. There's a synergy learning experience for me as a director that's hard to explain, but so every once in a while it's good to play a little bit, but otherwise they start looking down and they never look at you because you're ringing and you're not doing anything for them. So unless they're ringing with your arms, back to the whole arm thing and following you that way. So on number C, if I ring E and F, does that mean I play E flat and F sharp? Yes, and that also is back to the space on the table and making sure that you don't stand bells up that you aren't using, that they remain in position all the time, because if somebody needs the E sharp and it's standing up because the F person doesn't need it, they won't be able to get to it. And I always say, when you're playing in the key of C, do you go up to the piano and take all the black keys off? Well, if you took all the black keys off, could you find anything? They're the landmarks, and so are all the bells. They're landmarks. So making sure that we get back to the formation that's not straight across on the board, but those two different positions where you can see differentiation. And then helping each other play parts. Number D, where does the doubling begin for sevenths? So once you get to the 4 octaves, 2 octaves is G4 to G6. This is how they sell them, the manufacturers. Then when they add 3 octaves, they're adding a half octave on each end, so you get C4 to C7. And then when you get G, so you'll notice that bell pieces, like for 2 octaves, lots of bell pieces in the key of G. Makes sense, except for the people on the outside. They really should do other keys, because people on the outside don't get to play very much, and then 5 octaves, now we're out to C again. So when you get the 4th octave, the top part of the 4 octave, then you get C sharp 7 up to G7, and this, and I do the doubling starting at C sharp 7. So the C sharp 6 person doubles, and you can see I've got them laid out on the table, already stacked. Some people have switched because we were doing it in class. Well, this is the only doubles in this front row. It takes up a lot less space, and we'll talk more about that in the 4-hand class. But the doubling starts there, and we've already talked about how to prepare ringers. If you just have 3 octaves, if you bring the B6 and the C7 down, so they have to do the A and B5 ringer, and the C and D6 ringer, they can four in hand one bell, you know, and that's on the charts. That's good. I have written down here on my note, why not why not G and B and A and C at the top, you know, for people to have two bells in each hand. There are a lot of things you can't do if someone has the last four bells. They can't mark just one bell. They can't just shake one bell. Without the potential of shaking the other bell if they have it. That's why I like other options for dividing that stuff up at the top. If you've got fewer ringers, moving some of it down instead of one person playing a big chunk at the top.
I have a question about some doubling stuff.
Yes.
With limited ringers, how low would you recommend that you could go and double four-in-hand Shelley ringing? So as far as, I know obviously 5 octaves, you're doubling that whole top octave up there.
Right.
With less people, I have some people that are able to do four-in-hand. I'm just worried about the way of the bells. You know, if we only have 6, 7 people, are we able to do 3 octaves by getting somebody instead of 7 and 8s?
If you only have 6 people, I wouldn't ring 3 octave music.
But I'm looking to garner another person or 2. That's why I was wondering, what would you say is the threshold for doubling 2-in-hand, octave 2-in-hand?
Well, here's another piece about that then. It has to do with how the music's written. The doubling, starting at C sharp 6 and going on up to the C8, the music's written for those 2 bells to be played at the same time because they're just enhancing the melody up an octave. They're expanding the sonic experience for the listener. When you start, even if you take the B5 person and give them the B6, those lines are independent. They have nothing to do with one another. They don't necessarily play at the same time. So that gets really challenging to accomplish both musical lines with integrity. I don't think I would go much farther down. I think F and G5 having an extra bell in the hand over time would really tax somebody. So I really think the AB ringer is probably as low as you could go and double. Because the other piece is the handles have changed. On the Schulmerich, it depends. The Malmark, the handles are the same size.
Yeah, we have the old shoulder too.
The Schulmerich, let's see. No, these are the same. Here it changes. So, do you see the size of the handles are different. This is a G and this is an A. The handle's wider. So the A5 is really as low as I would feel comfortable asking someone, because if they were having to four-in-hand these 2 wider handles, or if they had one of these and a smaller one all the time, but 2 of these size handles might not be too bad, but this one and another one gets really hard. It looks like the Malmark doesn't, the Malmark changes at C, it looks like. No, D. Oh, that's D to E6. It changes there. So I think that's the other thing, is what you're asking physically, and then musically what they're doing. I think the musical part is the trickier one to decide. Placing ringers, I'm on the next page. I think you have to consider their musical background. And the goal is to work towards the ringer's strength and to help build their ringing ability rather than focusing on their weaknesses. We tend as musicians to focus on the weaknesses instead of the strengths. So finding out what their strengths are. When I was in high school, I played tennis for just 1 year, and I became a better tennis player when I played with the first seed on our team than playing with the 5th seed, because I needed to be playing with a better player to make me a better player. And so your weaker ringers will get better when they play with better ringers. And so you've got to watch the abilities in your groups. If you have multiple groups, trying to make sure that that's even and equal. We've already talked about trying to hide the weak ringers in positions that play infrequently, and so you don't want to do that. And then B, a rhythmic ability. There are some specifics. about rhythmic ability and physical ability. So here are some positions and qualifications or things to consider. In the bass section, they need to be strong, and if they're tall, it really helps. They get leverage on the big from G3 down. There's a lifting ability that's really helpful, but I've seen people of all stature play bass bells, so I don't want you to limit that, but you also want to consider that if they've not played before, their physical strength to do that. Then the from G and A4 to F and G5, again, G and A4 to F and G5, they need to have a strong sense of rhythm. A lot of accompaniment patterns in this area, so someone who really has a good sense of rhythm. And how do you find that out? Put your pencil down. This is so quick and easy. This is just a quick rhythmic interview. I'll clap and you clap back for me. That person is a great candidate. I ramped up pretty quick, you know what I'm talking about? But you start with something very simple, you move on to a complicated thing, you move on to a more complicated thing. If they can follow that, they can play the rhythmic stuff, okay?
Would you repeat that
Yes.
range you gave?
GA4 to F and G5. The next range is AB5 to G and A6. They need to have a good sense of melodic material, shaping the phrase. These are people, flute players and people who, violin. People just have a really good sense of a singing phrase. People who are very musical, sensitive. People who are good listeners. They can play based on what's coming towards them and away from them. Then the next range is D6 to C7 if you're playing 5 octaves. They need dexterity and sharpness to learn to ring multiple bells in one hand. They need dexterity and sharpness to learn to ring multiple bells. And B6, C7, this person needs patience and the ability to count. Someone who's really good at focusing. They don't ring a whole lot no matter what size group you have. That needs to be a person who's not ADD. It needs to be the person who's just diligent, steady, always there. And again, this is really about assigning people to their strengths, finding out what they do well, finding a position that caters to them. And then considering the attention span. Some of this has to do with your pace of your rehearsal and how you guide them through that process. But again, I've got a young man who rang B6 and C7, and he was the only boy at the top of the table. All the rest of the boys were down here, but this boy is a fantastic piano player. He has the mind, the intelligence to play 4-in-hand. And he's in middle school, and I said, do you know why? I just said it in front of the whole group. I said, do you know why you're standing up here? And he said, no. I said, I'm grooming you. I said, do you know what that means? And he said, getting me ready for something else. I said, yes. I'm grooming you for 4-in-hand ringing because I think you have the aptitude and intelligence to do that. He was like, he thought he was being punished by not ringing the rest of the boys, It's like every once in a while you have to tell somebody, you're here because this is a good place for you. These ADD boys who want to poke each other all through the rehearsal, he could never do that, but he could, and he needed to know that was a good thing. So, I think we have a page. I'll speak fast. Here's a checklist for assigning a particular piece. I like to mark at the top of the bells use chart the positions. I put them in parentheses. C and D5, or C and D4, C and D4. I just put parentheses around them on the bells used chart. I do that on my chart. And then if I want to go into the ringers, I'll just circle their set of notes. So they just glance up and see what sharps and flats they have for the piece. I assign the bass. We've already talked about that. I tell them what they are. If I want to go in and mark their score where the special things are, I can. If I want to tell them so they put it in their own writing, so it's something familiar that they've done, I sometimes do it like that. I check to see what the difficult bell changes are and have a plan for them. And sometimes that means I have to go around to the other side of the table and show them how it will work. I have found that I can talk them through it. Okay, then put this down and this up. But if I walk over there and do this, it's 10 times faster. It's worth walking on the other side of the table. Again, if it's a standard practice for marking the ringer scores for special things, go ahead and do that. I ask my ringers not to mark a whole lot in their score when we're first ringing. They'll want to start marking everything. It's like, no, just read. Make your mistake. It's okay. If you've missed it 3 times, then something's not working. Go ahead and put a note up there. D, I always check for the special notations. Sometimes the upper trebles, they'll have a bracket and it'll say double the top note, but sometimes it's double all the stems up. So you want to make sure that you read all those asterisks and what they mean. And then E, are the chime parts playable by the same ringer who has that note? Can the AB5 ringer play the AB5 chimes that have been assigned? Sometimes that doesn't work, and so really taking a look and maybe that gives somebody else an option to play that doesn't have anything else in that spot. So those are the basic things I know about assigning bells. Thank you very much.